everybody, and welcome to Felixstowe Matters this wonderful Monday morning in the end of November. This morning I've got Mike Ninnmey. So I always get your
join the club.
I always get his surname wrong. It's Mike Ninnmey, and Mike is very much a friend of Felixstowe TV. And this morning I'm going to interview him on his role as coordinator for the Bartlet Bequest Action Group. Mike, you've been involved with the Bartlet Bequest Action Group for quite a while now.
Since its formation.
Since its formation.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about why this group had to come into being.
Well, basically, you're aware that Roy Gray and others since about 96, 97 led a not only a town campaign but a much wider one about the concern that if a facility that specifically was there for rehabilitation was no longer provided, that would leave a massive hole in health provision for our community overall. So that they fought a fight against the then NHS structure, against the Bartlet being closed, and were successful. The minister at the time, Frank Dobson, intervened and had them put aside the closure decision and stated that the alternative to it wasn't good enough, so go back to the drawing board. And it was thought that the Bartlet then, because of its usefulness specifically to Ipswich General Hospital, which for what it was initially intended to be the rehab centre for, that was fine and dandy, and it would continue because they then brought it back into operation, kept it going, but specified and really strengthened the rehabilitation element within the Bartlet, though it was also used for palliative and other usage, but primarily rehabilitation. And I got sucked into the Save Our Hospital Action Group as a result of shopping at Tesco's.
Shopping at Tesco's?
Yeah, it's a disaster actually. Tesco's, as you know, is by the triangle.
Yeah.
And this was before all the shared space thing, etc., etc. And Roy Gray, Peter Mellor and others were there on a particular day when I was exiting, looking for folks to give a hand. I think I'd just been elected as a councillor for Westward here in Felixstowe. So my interest was there.
You were a target anyway.
I was mugged. You could say I was mugged by Roy Gray and Peter Mellor, and so therefore we continued to work as the Save Our Hospital Action Group, because at that time we had two hospitals. We had the Cottage Hospital, which was known as the General Hospital, and we had the Bartlet Convalescent Home, which was renamed the Bartlet Hospital. So probably for a community of our size, we were very, very fortunate, but we were very fortunate that previous generations thought of their community and made provision for it. And that's perhaps what a good community does.
Yeah, I think the Bartlet was such a superb hospital anyway. I mean, the setting of it was just absolutely wonderful. I mean, for anybody wanting to come here to convalesce, to be sitting in a ward and looking out to sea, absolutely marvellous.
And the sound, the sound of the sea and whatever. And there is a study whereby health researchers relate the impact and the help that the setting has for a recovering patient. And the jury's still out on what it does and what it doesn't do. My view is that it's a big contributor. And if we look at Victorian and Edwardian mental health, often they created sanatoriums in places that were quiet, perhaps remote, but where the everyday impact of the traffic, the noise and whatever, didn't impact. And it was a place of safety.
And of course here in Felixstowe we've got a great history of this sort of thing, of convalescent homes.
Indeed.
In fact, and virtually, with the closure of the Bartlet, I think they're virtually all gone now.
Pretty much. I mean, you've now got the modern day nursing home.
Yes, of course.
Which is slightly different. I mean, that tends to be the end of the care home when the resident requires a disproportionate amount of help that care homes cannot provide. So it's not really, it's a whole different sort of concept. In fact, they seem to be the replacement for what used to be the long stay mental and physical hospitals that the NHS used to provide back in the 70s.
Yeah.
But for the Bartlet, what then happened, we had a promise when the PCTs first came into being that the town would have, it would utilise its two hospitals in a slightly different way. We were told by the first chief executive that the Bartlet would become initially a 50-bedded unit, and they would look to get some NHS funding to increase it to 75. And the general hospital would effectively become the day hospital, which would work very closely with Ipswich Hospital, providing clinics and services, so our population wouldn't necessarily have to travel to Ipswich to get that service, which sounded a really wonderful use of existing NHS estate.
Be a pretty good idea these days when we have to go. Now all of us have to go up to Ipswich Hospital for our outpatients and everything. Yeah. They do very little of that kind of service here.
Well, the promise was that it would function as an outreach hospital. Yeah. You know, in lots of areas. To that end, they put in a hearing clinic. They were going to upgrade the X-ray, etc. There were lots of schemes that Suffolk Coastal Primary Care Trust, which was the first of this new creation of Primary Care Trust, did promise. And that particular chief executive had difficulties with the finance, as they're always going to, because there's always more to be done than there's money to do it with. She was replaced by a chief executive called Carol Taylor-Brown, who undertook and gave the same commitment. So we felt quite reassured. So we were amazed when in 2005 we had this Changing for the Better scheme, which envisaged virtually taking all the services out.
Change for the better.
Well, the words they choose are, you know, they're how to sort of obscure a horror story, and Changing for the Better in my case was one of those. So there was a long campaign led by Save Our Hospital Action Group, and to cut a long story short, it went all the way and was appealed to the then Secretary of State for Health, Patricia Hewitt. And she pretty much agreed with the Primary Care Trust. And are you surprised?
Yeah, no, not surprised at all.
So coming out of that, the majority of the folk who were a part of the Save Our Hospital Action Group, because it was Save Our Hospitals, it then reverted back to Save Our Hospital, because we'd already lost one, they were very concerned because what was being the blackmail or the pressure point, perhaps, rather than was that if you fought for both, you might lose both. So I think our MP and others took the view that better to have something than nothing. And who was it? It was Burnham, I think, was the Health Secretary at the time. Came forward with a sum of money, about 1.8 million, I think, to upgrade the general and make that a supposedly genuine community hospital.
Yeah.
And we've asked, well, what is a community hospital? And there is no definition.
Of course there isn't. Of course there isn't.
Because if you don't define a thing, you can't see when it's not doing what it's defined to do. Good system, very good system. But out of that, there was not a disagreement. I think the Save Our Hospital Action Group wanted to continue to monitor the performance of this new community hospital. But there were some of us who thought we should challenge the Secretary of State's decision legally. And really, the Bartlet Bequest Action Group came together in December of that year to make that challenge. That was its prime focus. It wasn't just the Bartlet, it was Bartlet's bequest, which was the building, but a considerable endowment that went with the building, which was to continue to deliver it into perpetuity, which is what it's supposed to have done.
Yes.
And we felt very strongly that Dr. Bartlet's gift was being undervalued. Their commitments to it were being reneged on. So that's fundamentally what we did. So we went to court.
Yeah.
And we were told by our solicitor before we went to court, if you're looking for justice, don't go to court. And sadly, his words proved to be true.
Yeah, because I think to anybody who lives locally here, the logic, if you're going to lose one hospital, the logic of keeping what was the general and dumping the Bartlet doesn't seem to be very logical, just simply because the now community hospital is a much smaller hospital. It's dreadful to park there, and it's not the most pleasant of buildings. Whereas the Bartlet had everything. It had plenty of space. It was a nice setting and plenty of room to park your car as well.
Yeah,
and
had its own kitchens.
Yes,
but I think it's a very long story, and we'll be able to tell this story.
Yes, I think that will be.
And the reason we'll be able to tell this story is that a number of us have always thought that most of the community doesn't really know the full story of the Bartlet because it's been on over 100 years or so. So we were looking to be able to afford to commission a play, and we just can't afford to do that. But we heard that Heritage Lottery Fund were doing a new stream of funding, and it's called All Our Stories. So with the assistance of our very able playwright, we made a bid, and we didn't hear a word. So we assumed that had gone down the pan. So our surprise was total when we got a letter saying, here's £10,000, get on and do the following. And the following actually are 5 things we've got to do. We've got to do more extensive research than we've already done. We've got to do an oral history, and I'm hoping that Felixstowe Radio and also Bartlet Radar, who've already done this project, can help us with that.
Yeah.
We're also looking to do a DVD stroke website, that part of the internet world. We're going to do an exhibition which will be probably a mix of various things, but key to all of this is using all of those inputs to create a hopefully fascinating drama of Dr. Bartlet himself, who never saw his gift being delivered because he had died before, but the good people who actually carried that vision forward and to now. With the uncertainty that we have over the building. So we are looking for, certainly out there we're looking for people who may have worked there, received the services of there, or had family members who did. And if you take on board the Bartlet was actually there to give full rehab or support service to anybody who'd been treated at Ipswich Hospital, you've got a catchment area probably of nearly 500,000 people, 400,000 people spread from sort of South Road to Manningtree all the way through up to Newmarket.
So
there's a lot of people out there who did have either worked there or had the services of it, and we would love to talk to them about their experience, because we've got a lot of information about Dr. Bartlet. We've got an awful lot about the legal process that delivered the building. We've got an awful lot about the building of it. We've got a huge amount when it was run as a voluntary convalescent home. There's a big gap for the NHS period, and we've got now a fair bit of info of the changing for the better or whatever, and then what's that. So our big gap is the NHS years, really.
Yeah, well, that would be good, because it's good to remind people that, of course, the hospital wasn't just for Felixstowe; it was for East Suffolk, and so there's a large number of people, have been involved with it over the years from quite a wide range.
I think one of the difficulties that Save Our Hospital Action Group had was engaging in a wider community. We were sort of stuck in the peninsula and couldn't get off it, a bit like Wellington, really. We just couldn't get off the peninsula, and we did a few things in Ipswich, and we had interest, but it wasn't out of sight, out of mind a bit. And they were given Bluebird Lodge, so I think they thought that they had a provision, and only time will show whether that's actually the right type of provision and the right type of size.
It's a nightmare for folks at the moment, because I know of a few people that have been in Ipswich Hospital. They've needed convalescent care, and they've been offered Aldeburgh. It's a local place, isn't it?
No, it's quite local. No, but I mean the capacity of Aldeburgh is greater than that of Felixstowe. Yeah. And one of the reasons, I think, was the community at Aldeburgh actually got got themselves together because they were under as big a threat as us. And what they did, they introduced dialysis into that as a provision. So that added an extra 6 months. And the whole basis of it, and perhaps one day we can sit down and talk about the reasons they gave for the closure, most of which have unravelled since. But the key thing that they said, and it takes you back to the bit you just said on Ipswich Hospital, was that we had a new national tariff that was introduced. And the national tariff made the obligation for rehabilitation to be that was placed upon either the specialist hospital or the district hospital. And on that understanding, in changing for the better, the chief executive contended, because the tariff could not be split, there was no means of funding places like the Bartlet.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was their sort of ace in the hole for the closure. What's happened since is that the acute and district don't rehabilitate as a criteria for discharge. What they now say is you are stable. Now that's not the same as being rehabilitated.
No, it isn't. It isn't.
But at that point they now say they can discharge you. But the place they should have been able to discharge you to is no longer there. No. So you go back to your home. Now your recovery will depend very much upon what type of home you have, and what friends and family you have who can muck around, and probably how much money you can afford to get specialist treatment in to help you get better. So the consequence of this, and Dr. Bartlett would be spinning like a top in his grave, is that the discrimination in health recovery is now very much to what means you have. And he tried to use his wealth to address that deficit. And we've gone back to pre-Bartlett now.
In many ways, yes. I mean, there are certain levels of support within the community,
yes,
voluntary or from social services, that sort of thing, to help people.
Stretched very, very thin.
But I've
meeting people that I've met, certainly as a counsellor, who were living up on a third or fourth floor flat, who didn't have many friends, who were discharged, pretty fragile. Their recovery took a long time, and whether they actually fully recovered is really the question.
Well, I come across people, of course, all the time, and same thing. They're coming home, and if it wasn't for their friends and their family, they would struggle considerably.
Yes,
and often people end up back in hospital because they've had an accident at home, or their conditions deteriorated because they've not had proper care, having been sent home from hospital in the first place.
Yeah. But if we go all the way back to Dr. Bartlett, when he was chief physician at Ipswich Hospital, we believe that some of the drive, bear in mind he died 1917, so the First World War was still raging, there was huge demand on medical care. He still wished to provide a convalescent home. Specifically, one of his big drivers were ladies who'd been admitted to hospital for some acute procedure, who then were sent back into a home with the demands that had, and he would then see them again later, probably worse than when they started. So all our stories, hopefully, we will be able to tell that story to those who, and hopefully Suzanne will be able to make it high and low and highlights and lowlights, because she's very good at that. She did Giles, she's done Wolsey, she's done Orwell, and hopefully, I mean, whether the Bartlett will be a musical or a drama or both or what, only the efforts of folks there today can determine that.
Yeah, it's a great way of doing it, isn't it?
I think it's brilliant. And one thing that was an unintended consequence of the fact that we've been very fortunate in receiving this grant is that the Felixstowe Society has reconsidered its support for the Heritage Open Day in next year, 2013.
Excellent.
And we're now going to be doing one. Probably smaller scale than the one we did in the inaugural year this year, but to have such a wonderful project, which we will have a gala opening in that weekend, gives us a real big spirit. So there it goes.
There we go.
That's the baby.
Right, in our final few minutes, let me just take us from the past to the future.
Oh, well,
because I understand big things are happening on the local plan angle. Could you bring us up to date a little bit on it?
Well, some of you may be aware that there's been a whole different change in planning pre the coalition government coming in and coming with this sort of very abbreviated form of whatever. So underpinning that is a local plan. And the previous administration came forward with an idea that rather than have a solid book that you wrote, put in the library, used for 20 years, brought it out and did it all again, you'd really have a file with different segments in it, and you could take those out and renew them. So they called this the Local Development Framework.
Right.
And I think our introduction to it was at Walton Community Hall on March the 11th, 2008. And that has wound its way through the system.
It's a little bit of history in itself anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you may be aware that was a very cold night, and we had 200 people locked out and 100 locked in with police. I mean, it was a bizarre situation for something like a local
really
plan.
quite an exciting thing to happen just for a local plan, isn't it, really?
Well, it was, but it was very fortunate that I had a pad that a member that was locked outside could go and collect all the names, so we were aware of who wanted to know. But what's happened over the last month is that the core strategy of this plan has been subject to a public hearing in various locations around our district on whether this plan is sound in all respects and compliant. So what happens is the Minister for Communities and Local Government appoints a barrister or a judge or whoever who comes and takes hearings, a bit like Judge Jeffries, I suppose. I don't know whether the outcome will be the same, but he sits as judge and jury, and you have those for it on one side and those who've got questions about it on the other, and particular topics that he suggests are then debated. And I only managed to get to two of these. The first one was the global one for the whole of the district, which was dealing in employment, housing numbers, etc. And what was perhaps gratifying to hear, and the population as a whole doesn't seem to have heard it, is that the prediction for our district, made by an outfit from Oxford as a part of the regional study, was that this district will create, in the time of this plan, 7,000 new and brand new different jobs. And you could have knocked me down with a feather.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's good then, isn't it? For that's a total population of about 110,000 existing, with an awful lot of retired, so they're not looking. A similar number of under 16, they won't be looking. So that middle segment is going to grow pretty big. Or I assume that's the assumption of if you create these 7,000 jobs. And the big word in that is if.
If.
So those who were concerned said, well, where will these jobs be coming from? And they were given a stock answer of the Port, BT, and I think Sizewell may have been added on at the end of it. But it was pointed out they would only be sort of cycling jobs, and they'll be coming from outside.
Yes, and again, Sizewell is a considerable distance from a commuting point of view.
Yeah, but it's the district, so it's a district-wide figure they came up with. But I mean, there was evidence given at a further hearing by one of the councillors at Trimley St Mary, saying that she'd lived there, I think, for a very long time. So every time we hear of a further expansion in whatever, there was always the claim of X number of jobs being created. The reality has not been that.
No.
Because if you're going to be doing a new project, one would do it as efficiently as you can.
And in the present economic climate, where are jobs going to be created? I mean, that's the issue.
So, riding on the back of this was the claim that we should be having 11,000 additional dwellings built. So one should lead to the other, apparently. But if that's not going to be delivered, then
7,000 jobs, 11,000 dwellings. How does that tally?
Wow, that was a further challenge to the developers. I mean, the figure had been 7,600 or so. So it sort of appeared virtually overnight to 11,000. And when you look at the actual financial implications of that, to jump from the 7.6 to the 11 is about an additional £1 billion worth of house sales. So you can quite see why the developers were very keen to have this bigger global figure. across the district, but it also represents 20% of our existing housing stock.
Yeah.
So you're going to grow the district by 20% in as little a period as 15, 16, 17 years. Seems a huge rate of growth. And the justification in the infrastructure didn't to me, but I didn't hear all of it, to be there. But the inspector has now had all his hearings. Yeah. The only notes that were taken were exclusively for him, so you don't have any access to any knowledge of what went on. I mean, I feel that a camera like that should have sat in there and recorded all of that for everybody. I mean, the future of this district isn't only for the inspector and the few folk that got around those tables, it's for everybody who lives there. And it strikes me that there were no press recording, there was nobody there other than the few, like me perhaps, who had a previous involvement with it, who knew it was going on and was able to attend a couple of meetings. But it was not as well attended as I was hoped. The one that dealt specifically with Felixstowe, the Trimleys and Walton, there wasn't anybody there other than the cabinet member from Felixstowe at all, which is quite amazing.
Well, considering the amount of interest there has been here in the last 3 or 4 years, I think that's incredible. But
who was going to tell you?
Exactly, and that's how things slip under the radar, isn't it?
They do.
Yeah,
they do.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mark, I think we must be getting.
We're just about near the end of our time.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about this within the coming weeks.
Oh, we will.
We certainly will. And so we're coming to an end of what we're doing this morning. What we've done is Mike's produced a short video on the Bartlet, and that's going to be coming onto our archive very, very soon. So please go and have a look for it and learn a little bit more about this wonderful award and what the Bartlet Bequest Action Group are going to do about it.
So could I just add, on the 7th of December at 7 p.m. at Broadway House, Orwell Road, here in Felixstowe, we're having an open evening to discuss this actual All Our Stories lottery funding. So if you have any interest, any particular area of expertise or knowledge, or you just want to know what we could do for the Bartlet, we invite you to that meeting at Broadway House on the 7th at 7.
Great. Okay, thanks a lot, Mike, and goodbye, everybody.
Much, Mark. Thank you indeed.